it was like the Reese's on the counter at Movie Land. It was like everybody's like standing in line to pay, and it's like, oh, they've got the unplugged. It's like they're spontaneously buying MTV Unplugged on CD when they're checking out in the mid-90s. Everybody was listening to this.
MTV Unplugged in New York by Nirvana. This first aired on December 16th, 1993. It was released as the album on DGC Records November 1st, 1994. This, for me, guys, is like the definitive Unplugged session. It's also was just a complete sensation upon the release of the album. Went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the US, but also just like all across the world, this thing went to number 1. Of course, it did come in the months following Kurt Cobain's death. Welcome to Self-Titled. I'm Seth Sparks, joined by Josh Best and Landon Borders to discuss this album. I am so excited to get into this, and I've been deep in the Nirvana world here for the last few weeks as we've been preparing this. Josh, before we dive into the album, we want people to be part of the conversation we're doing here at Self-Titled. What should people do to support our channel?
Like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us in podcast land, share all these things with your friends.
Beautiful. You're finally going to subscribe.
I'm doing it.
I am excited to talk to both of you about this album. Landon, you did pick this album to discuss, and I'm really grateful that you did. It's one of my favorites of the 90s. I don't think we ever talked about this, though. We were talking a little bit before we hit record. Like, I don't think we've all ever had a conversation about like fandom of Nirvana or this album in particular. So I can't wait to talk about your history with it. And I guess we can just get right into it. Landon, what do you remember about Nirvana coming on the scene? Were you like a fan immediately? Was it a little bit later in their run? Tell me a little bit about you and Nirvana.
Yeah. So let's see. I was probably in middle school when Smells Like Teen Spirit hit the airwaves on MTV. And I hated it. I did not like it. I was like, I don't get it. What's this guy doing? These cheerleaders are gross. I just didn't buy into it. But, in reflection, it turns out that, I'm a huge Nirvana fan. It grew on me just like most music that's new and different. You have a tendency to go, what is this kind of thing? But you like it just enough to keep listening to it. Well, that was me and my experience with Nirvana. And, starting with that song and just really kind of going all in, right? After I started listening to Lithium and some of the other songs that kind of hit MTV, that was kind of my media at the time. That's kind of how I was consuming a lot of music. But this album in particular, you mentioned, probably the best unplugged performance. And I was thinking about this before we got on here. I would argue that it's the best live recorded TV experience of all time, right? I mean, I was trying to think like what other live concerts have I seen that have moved me as much as this album? And for me personally, there isn't one.
That's funny. I was at similar beginnings with Nirvana, and it took me a long time. I was reluctant and I was resistant to it. You're right too. It's hard to think of any live performances. I'm thinking of like, I remember that 9/11 tribute that was like a big deal, and there were a lot of different performances of kind of varying degrees, and there were like a couple performances that were great. But this is different. This is like one band sitting there in a just like captivating. It's a mesmerizing performance live. And Josh, okay, we started hanging out again. Well, obviously, like we grew up together. We've known each other our whole lives, but we really started connecting again when we were 14, definitely 15. And each of us had developed very distinct tastes in music. But one of the first things I remember after we started hanging out again was that your favorite band was Nirvana. These were your guys. Like, tell me a little bit about what you remember of Unplugged, or even just before, just like getting into Nirvana. Like, how immediate was it for you?
I don't think it was immediate, because if you think about when Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, I want to say, was that 91 or 92? I mean, I'm 10 or 11 years old. I don't think I quite grabbed it right then, but Landon said we were all watching MTV. I mean, this is the heyday of MTV. So I am spending a lot of time watching MTV, and Smells Like Teen Spirit played all the time. And I think probably in your utero played even more. Um, and so I think it was probably when In Utero came out where you're just seeing these videos over and over again. And then I'm like, okay, this is starting to make sense, and I'm getting into harder, harder, moodier rock and roll music coming out. I'm putting away my Paula Abdul and MC Hammer tapes and ready to get into the Seattle scene. But I can remember. I mean, we were so young, but I can remember some of my friends and some of my older friends kind of blaming me getting into Nirvana just because Kurt Cobain had committed suicide. So I feel like it was probably not too long, you know, before that where I was really all in. And then I remember the Unplugged. I remember being a kid and them promoting it and saying this is coming on, and me being like, "Oh, I'm going to watch that." So I mean, by the time Unplugged aired, I think I was probably all in. And then definitely I remember by the time Unplugged came out on CD, I was like, I'm gonna be there to buy the album as soon as it comes out. I remember that being one of my first CDs I ever bought. So
Yeah. In
yeah.
utero was
I
my first CD.
yeah,
Ever.
yeah. So, I think it probably, like Landon, probably didn't resonate right away because at 10 or 11 years old watching the Smells Like Teen Spirit video, I'm probably like, this is scary and what in the world is going on here?
Yeah, I was like at that age, I was, and we've talked about this a little bit about when we've talked about this time period, but like I've got an older brother and I'm going through his collection. I remember he had Nevermind, but I kind of put that aside. I was really into like getting into older Beatles and Pink Floyd and stuff like that. I was trying to get in that. And then of course I am 10 or 11, so I'm probably also listening to like Bobby Brown or Landon. You and I have talked about the Ghostbusters 2 soundtrack. I think I had that on tape. I was probably
So
getting
good.
into that around this time. It's a classic.
That'll be the
Um,
next
that's our next deep dive is the Ghostbusters 2 soundtrack. But I remember like this for Nirvana. I always had this thing about bands around that time who were really heavier. And I mean, these aren't metal bands, but they're heavy. Like when you're listening to everything else that's going on at the time, and there's a lot of dissonance and it's kind of challenging. But I remember like hearing this and having this chip on my shoulder that's like, they're hiding behind the distortion. They're hiding behind these things. And it's like underneath all of that, is it actually any good? And that was kind of my knock on it. I was really a pretentious little 11 or 12-year-old. But I remember when this album came out, and even before it came out, I remember when it aired, and it completely annihilated all of those criticisms because it's like they're not hiding behind any of that stuff. This is very stripped down. They're sitting down. It's they're and when you get into it, you could this is right on the line of actually being unplugged. Like you hear a lot of guitar effects. He has an amp. He's running this things through. Like it plays with those lines and those boundaries a little bit, but the songs, his songwriting ability, his performance. I mean, a lot of these are covers, and we'll get into all that too. But to me, that was like it was like it validated them in this way that some of their other stuff. I thought, well, that's just like they're just being loud and angry, and that's all there is to it. And this was like a whole other layer of depth, Nirvana, and I felt like that. So this kind of endeared me to them on that level too. I remember I bought this album when it came out at Movie Land in Edmonton, Kentucky. I don't
album.
know
Nice
why they
movie
had
land
that.
reference. R.I.P.
And I don't know why Movie Land had this. Like they weren't known for selling albums. I think they just had it like it was just so popular. I think they just had it like as you checked out, like they would like a Reese's or something. You know what I mean? It's like you want Nevermind or do you want Unplugged? And I was like, yeah, I do want that. And listen to it all the time. I really became obsessed with it. Of course, when you go buy it at the time that's released, now there's this whole weight that it has on top of it because of what happens with Kurt. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that echoes some of your all's experience with it too. Is just like seeing this band in an intimate light was very different than how they'd been presented before Unplugged came out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and just real quick, you talked about like your experience with at Movie Land. For me, I was glued to the TV. I was so excited when like Josh, you see that advertisement come out, and I'm like, this is going to be great. And I actually recorded it on a cassette tape. I stuck my stereo next to the TV speaker and recorded the whole thing. And that's how I listened to it in my Walkman and, in the car and stuff for, those months that led up to the actual album release. And, poor sound quality and all. And I know we'll talk about it, but there was a few surprises on the album that weren't actually on the MTV broadcast. So had two pleasant surprises when the album came out.
it was such a big deal because they're they're doing this episode just in the height of their popularity. And so it's like, here's this band that has these videos and these songs that everyone's obsessed about. And then here you get to see them on stage, like, you know, you get to see them like you're at a concert. But, I'm 13 or 14 years old. I can't go to a Nirvana concert, but I certainly can tune into MTV and see this like really intimate setting. So, yeah, I think at the time it was just huge. And then, you know, then you have, the television outlet who records the thing is like, oh, we've got gold. Let's just run this like constantly. And then, I've got a theory where, when people are just exposed to something over and over again, at some point it's going to seep in. If it doesn't get you on the third listen, after you get hammered over the head with it 25 times, not that I'm saying, that this takes that. I'm just saying that that's what MTV did with it. It was like bam, 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 and then, gosh, and then after Kurt passes away, it's like, wow, now we've really got gold mine here. Let's just keep this thing going.
Yeah, you make a good point. Like this comes at a really interesting time for Nirvana. Their third album, the final studio album in utero, had been released just a couple months before they recorded this, and that album performed really well commercially, critically, maybe even to the band's surprise. I think they did not anticipate it to do particularly well. I think they wanted to make an album that was a little bit more rough around the edges. Kurt's battling addiction issues. By many accounts, was suffering from withdrawal during the session. Unplugged was like already super popular at this point. Several bands had released their unplugged sets as albums to great success, like that Clapton album. I remember that was everywhere. I remember my mom had the Clapton unplugged. That was huge. But Nirvana had been somewhat dismissive of the show, believing that many of the artists simply did acoustic versions of their biggest hits, which is kind of true. And when they were offered to do this, as typical of Nirvana, they had a vision for what they wanted. It was very different than what other artists had done. Not only are 6 out of the 14 songs covers, but the band really refused to play most of their biggest singles and hits from their studio albums. And that's what I think makes this Unplugged special. It feels like this own self-contained album instead of just a live album. And apparently the band was very nervous about this before the show. They'd been playing acoustic sets in many of the shows, like in the middle of their shows leading up to it. But even in rehearsals, people involved in the production were concerned that it was going to be a total train wreck. The rehearsals were really loose and unpolished, and that combined with the fact that they were like, no, we're not going to play like the songs that most people know. Even people in Nirvana's orbit were kind of holding their breath. And then the night before they record this album, the Unplugged crew, they did the Stone Temple Pilots Unplugged. It was recorded the very night before this, and that session had taken hours, several hours, and the songs they would do multiple takes. And it sounds like STP's Unplugged was really like this slog through the mud. So even the producers were worried that Nirvana's session might be equally taxing, if not more so. But it turns out that like they knew exactly what they were doing. They did everything in a single take, and the results are pretty much exactly what we hear on the album. I don't know. All that stuff I find fascinating, but like it's like This is Kurt being like, I know the rules that you guys go by, but here are our rules for doing this, and that's what makes this thing so special.
Yeah, another one of my favorite aspects about this particular unplugged session with Nirvana is that the producers were really pressuring them to bring in some big artists, right? So, for example, Eddie Vedder was one that they really wanted him to come in and do a song with them. Versus had just come out and it was a smash hit, sophomore hit for them. But Nirvana, in a true Nirvana fashion, was like, actually, we're going to bring the Meat Puppets. Which I just absolutely love that they were like, okay, we'll bring somebody and it'll be the Meat Puppets. And I mean, I'm so grateful for that because, the three songs that the Meat Puppets joined on stage with them are three of my favorites and some of the best performances, I think, on the album.
How crazy is it to be like, here's our platform, and we're just not only are we going to bring out the two guys from the Meat Puppets, we're going to do their songs. Uh, I'll sing it, and but we're just going to play their songs and almost promote the Meat Puppets. Like I think he said it's their second album. He says it in the middle of the tape, and it's like I think all three of these are from their second album. It's a wild thing to do, and it's stubborn and kind of bullheaded, but you're right. Like that stretch there, we'll get into the track by track, but and then to have the foresight to bring out the cello, and Pat Smear's with the band at this point, that really thickens the sound a little bit. I think the stars were kind of aligned to make this happen at the right time. It obviously couldn't have happened any later than this, knowing where Kurt was.
I think it shows you what a great performer Kurt Cobain was, and just a genius. I don't know, musician or performer, whatever you want to say, artist. To have the foresight to know, hey, it might be easy or comfortable to play our hits, or to know that what, Nirvana's thing is kind of turning it up really loud and me screaming, and our normal performance is not going to go over on at this platform. And so it would be almost silly to play those songs in an acoustic style because those songs weren't written to be performed that way. So rather than playing all the songs that people are familiar with in an acoustic version, why don't I go find a set that I think would be really good and that I would do well performing in songs I really like. And Nirvana didn't need Unplugged to be good for them to keep their thing going. I mean, they're already just a massive success. This thing could have gone any way, and it's not gonna derail the Nirvana train that's going. So I think Kurt was probably like, hey, these are songs I really like. These are musicians I like to play with. I think doing these songs with these people is going to produce the best set. So I think he did a genius job by standing his ground, and he I think he knew his leverage there. It's like, look, MTV wants Nirvana. Well, if you want Nirvana, this is what we're gonna play. We're not gonna play the 14 songs you want us to play.
There's a point in the recording of it where somebody's like, he says, "Is anybody have requests?" Which I don't know why he asked that because I feel like they have pretty clear mapped out what they want to do. And someone says "In Bloom," and he's like, "How are we going to play In Bloom in this?" So like he knows it's those things you're saying, Josh. Is like he knows that like how Smells Like Teen Spirit going to even play in this. So I'm not even we're not going there. He was wise and very selective in the material he chose.
And I would go so far as to say that it almost feels like there's a little foreboding and kind of what transpired just a few months afterwards too, because some of these songs are haunting. The stage is haunting. A lot of people talk about how it kind of looked like a funeral. Some of the final songs on the album are just kind of the microphone drop moment. Felt like goodbye to a lot of his fans and family, and it was the absolute peak for them. It really was. I mean, they had went on this roller coaster ride that really led them to this moment in time. And I think that level of fan or of famousness, if you will, or that
Mm.
level of popularity, I think is was kind of the last straw for Kurt, unfortunately.
It's funny when I think about the early 90s because it's pretty distinct, and especially musically, like musically it's a pretty distinct the early 90s versus the end of the 90s. It's two very different musical times. This to me feels like the culmination of all the like this is sort of the apex of those early 90s moments. After this, we start things start to change, like Kurt's gone. Some of those other bands become a little less prolific. Pearl Jam's kind of consistent, doing their thing. But some of the other bands that were influential around this time either start to change or start to fall apart on their own, and things start to merge. This does feel kind of like the high water mark to me for that early 90s alternative movement that was so special. To get into the track list here, just jumping into it with About a Girl. Originally off of Bleach, the band's first record. Most people don't own it.
Most people don't own it.
This song holds a special place for me. This was the first song that I ever learned to play on guitar, on anything, and really it was just that main chord progression with the E minor to a G. My brother taught me that, but it sets the tone for the whole album. This was released as a single ahead of the Unplugged, the album version of Unplugged, which makes sense. It's a great preview of the fact that this won't just be a collection of the band's greatest hits.
Man, I can't believe you. This was one of the first songs I learned also. And I didn't own the Bleach album. I hadn't listened to it honestly. It was kind of hard to come by back then, frankly. But same, I think I found it in a Guitar World magazine. Had the tabs in there, and I learned how to play it, and really fell in love with the song. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of one of their pop songs. They had a few of those, and maybe at least one or two more on this album. But yeah, that chord progression, it was just really catchy. I thought it was a perfect song to really kick it off.
That's funny. It is like because I remember when I first learned it, it's like, okay, just here use these two fingers for the E minor, and then you just go up to just move this one finger over here, and you've got the G. It's like a perfect early song to learn on the guitar.
I found Bleach, thank goodness, from like BMG or one of those get 12 CDs for a penny or something. And, I remember signing up for that and I was like, what CD should I get? Let me just get every Nirvana CD there is. And, but yeah, that Bleach is, when you've listened to In Utero and never mind, Bleach was a little more challenging, but Bleach is cool. I mean, there's 4 or 5 tracks that are really cool off Bleach I like. But yeah, About a Girl, and this this is a lot different from the album version. This stripped down version, it's super cool. I think Dave Grohl does a great job on this song and other songs where when you're so familiar with the album version and then you hear this, you start getting ready for these like awesome drum fills or like really kick it up, and then Dave kind of just keeps the space there, which I think is genius. He really lets Kurt shine.
That was everyone's biggest concern going into this was Grohl. Was like Dave Grohl was known as such a heavy hitter. You're talking about like how it was such a restrained performance, and that apparently one of the producers was so worried that they went out and bought some of those like brush sticks. Like they're not quite brushes, they're like thunder sticks, or I think that's what they called it. I remember Sam, our buddy, had a pair of those, but and they just kind of like subtly, they didn't know what to say to him. So they were just like, "Hey, Merry Christmas." And he was like, "Oh, cool. I've never had these before." And he used them, and it was huge. But like, you're right. I mean, and you see him back there, usually Dave's flailing around all over the place, but he's got his hair pulled back and he's very precise.
Crouched over the snare,
Yeah.
just trying like he's like playing a little baby xylophone or something. He's very careful the whole show.
and it sets the tone for everything that song does. You're right, Landon. It's very melodic. It's a good pop song. And then you get into "Come as You Are" off of Nevermind. This is one of the few songs that was previously released as a single from a studio album. This is one of the few that was immediately recognizable at the time, at least to more casual fans. And one of the funny things about this song is how similar the riff is to this other song. Killing Joke is the band with the song 80s, which is also very similar to the riff in Life Goes On by The Damned. And Kurt knew that. Kurt was aware of the similarities, especially to the Killing Joke song 80s, and was hesitant when they released it as the second single off Nevermind, but they did, and the rest is history. And again, I also want to call out Pat Smear. His contribution as a rhythm player, it really does thicken the sound without ever diluting any of the rest of the band's chemistry. That riff from "Come as You Are" is the perfect example. It takes the weight off of Kurt, but it's so subtle that you almost don't really hear Pat throughout the album. Like, it's really subtle. It just slides right into the overall sound. But this is a classic.
Yeah, definitely. Right after "About a Girl" coming at us with something that's very familiar that we know, kind of the stripped down version. I thought it was very well done. Great song on the album. Again, back to my earlier comment. I feel like he picked a lot of songs that are a bit foreboding, and the lyrics are famously here. And I swear I don't have a gun, and I hate to take the conversation there, but it comes up, and we got to talk about it.
It comes up because it was just so big. I mean, there's been celebrities die in the peak of their famousness, but um, I don't know if anybody. I can't think of the top off the top of my head anybody quite like where Nirvana was. I mean, they were on this trajectory where they're selling albums at the rate the Beatles were selling albums, and people are saying these are the next new, people that are going to be popular in every culture on the planet, everywhere we take them. They're just a wild success. So yeah, this song, you hear that on the album when they play it, it's like as soon as three or four notes is played of that riff, everybody's like cheering, like, yes, one of our favorite songs. And so yeah, this I think this one was cool because in the album version you do have a lot of effects, and it's kind of louder, and just has a lot more attitude. And I think it's cool to hear this song stripped down.
Landon, talk to me a little bit about "Jesus Don't Want Me for a Sunbeam." I have a feeling this will probably make your list of one of the favorites on that. How could it not? Like, this is just an
Yeah,
incredible song.
it definitely is, and it's one of those one of those that I heard for the first time, and I'm like, "What is happening?" You've got the accordion there, the accordion in the background. Chris got up and started playing that, and just adds this whole dimension that you've never heard in a song that's performed by Nirvana. Originally a Vaseline song. I wasn't quite familiar with them. I hadn't listened to them a lot, so it was kind of the first time I heard the song, and first time certainly hearing them perform it. But it's one that's probably wasn't on my favorite list when this album first came out. But of course, now I've listened to it a million times, and I absolutely love this song.
Josh, where are you at on this? I can imagine Chris with the accordion is right up your alley.
Oh yeah, I think that is super cool. I love it when musicians are just like, hey, what would fit this setting? I could play this over here. And it does. It kind of fits that perfectly. This song is like so haunting, to take to take what I would assume is like a religious children's song, and then flip it around and change the lyrics, and you know um to a lot of Kurt Cobain's lyrics were self-deprecating, and so this is like right up his alley. It's like, I'm so repulsive that Jesus doesn't even want me for some meme. So I think this song creates a great mood, and just this is like Nirvana, this song is right up Nirvana's alley. It's in their MO.
Yeah, the Vaselines were this Scottish duo, indie duo, not widely known, but Cobain was a fan of the band's songwriting duo. This sort of boyfriend girlfriend that split up, but they had actually opened for Nirvana at some point a few years earlier too. And their version is super cool. It's like a testament to Kurt's taste. The accordion's just amazing. I almost wish it were on more songs on Unplugged because it lends such weight and it sounds so good with everything else with the cello. Dave, what about Dave Grohl playing drums, bass, and singing harmonies at the same time on this song? I mean, wow, you can tell where this guy's headed after this.
That's a great point, man. I think, seeing some of the videos and listening to the songs, it wasn't apparent that Dave was such a great singer. And I think, this is one of the kind of peeks behind the curtain. And he does such a wonderful job on the album harmonizing in a lot of these songs, which is, a precursor to what happened with the Foo Fighters. When that band came out for the first time, I'm like, what? Dave Grohl's got this band and he's playing the guitar and writing all these songs. And that whole band and his career just skyrocketed. But this is kind of, a first peek at some of the extra talents that he had playing multiple instruments and singing backup.
Yeah, you're right. It's like maybe we should have known. It's wild to see him, and he does. I mean, he handles. He's basically their go-to harmony singer, and some of those harmonies can be a little unusual, a little weird, especially with some of the songs that we'll get into later in this album. But he's really good at it, and I didn't know it for years until I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, I hear like a hi hat, but Dave's playing the bass, and then you see he's doing it with his feet. Then he's over there singing harmonies. It blows my mind. But the way that everything comes together is just perfect. This is definitely one of my favorite songs off the album. And then it gets into, I mean, this 1-2 punch of this going into "The Man Who Sold the World." Obviously, David Bowie song, which Kurt says. But man, it's like, dude, are the covers like the best part of this album? This is like this other dimension, next level stuff that they bring to the table when they do this, and not a recognizable Bowie song to most people, especially like when they did this. Now I think probably a lot more people are aware of that, but it's the title track of Bowie's third studio album. Very early Bowie, great album. It's like Bowie's hard rock album. But Bowie later said that Nirvana's version felt like it had a lot of sadness because it was so tied up into Kurt's life and death, and it takes on all these different shades whenever Bowie would listen to it. And he said that when he wrote the song, by the way, David Bowie was 19 when he wrote "The Man Who Sold the World," which is like, wow, what planet was this man from?
Yeah.
He says he
Mars.
was in somewhat of a
Mars.
mystical state of mind. Mars, that's right. He kind of told us, didn't he? I don't know what he means by this, but he said he was in this mystical state of mind, and that Kurt also seemed like he was in that similar had that similar energy when he recorded it, so he speaks very fondly of it. But dude, epic guitar riff, the bass guitar runs, those major scales that they do in the chorus, musically this is just so appetizing. So many incredible chord changes. I'm a sucker for this song. When I hear like either of these two songs, "Jesus Don't Want Me for a Sunbeam" or "Man Who Sold the World," like that kind of defines this album for me. Completely blown away by this song, even to this day.
I remember the first time I heard this song on the album, I was like, what in the, this is not Nirvana. I mean, I think he says it maybe immediately after the song when everybody cheers. That's a David Bowie song, but it's like you almost knew. It's like, wait a minute, this doesn't sound like them. But anyway, it's so melodic, and a lot of Nirvana's music is it's easy to grasp the first time, and it's comfortable. And even though they're using dissonance and Kurt screaming, and there's this ugly part to it on purpose, I think it is very melodic, and so is "Man Who Sold the World." I remember hearing those bass runs you were talking about, and just being like, "Wow, this is so interesting and easy to follow along and pick it up." And that was a pleasant surprise. when I first listened to the album. I'd sure I'd seen the performance, but I remember this being one of my favorite songs immediately.
Yeah, this is definitely my top three on the album, and it strikes me that this is probably the first time we've really heard Kurt doing some cohesive storytelling in a song, right? A lot he's known for kind of lyrics that are a little bit nonsensical, hard to understand, but he's clearly telling a story here in this song with David Bowie's lyrics, and from the opening riff, that it's just kind of an iconic sound, just hitting that note there, and it just kind of flows right into a beautiful song that was so well done, and I thought the band was super tight on this particular track as well. And my experience with David Bowie at this point in my life was basically the Labyrinth and Dancing in the Street. So this was like my first like, oh, I need to really go explore this guy a little bit more. And I love Bowie, and I appreciate Nirvana and Kurt really kind of cracking that door open for us as young fans at the time to kind of provide broader exposure to some of these other bands they were covering. But absolutely amazing song, beautiful melody, amazing story, and just kind of just blew my mind when I heard this for the first time.
Kurt is like, as much as he is a great writer and performer and all those things, he seems like he's just a great curator too. Like a great, like, hey, you need to listen to this. Very good about promoting other people. And, it's not like Bowie needs promotion, but you see him wearing the Daniel Johnson shirts and bringing the meat puppets out, covering the Vaselines. Like, I feel like Kurt would have been like a great record store employee, or like 10 years 15 years later, like an indie blogger, like writing for Pitchfork, or like or a DJ. Like he has this ear for music, and it's also an ear for like, I also want to do this. Like I need to play this, and he picks great material to do. And then we get into Penny Royalty off of In Utero. Emotionally heavy song this is. When you know about Kurt's problems, not only his drug problems, but his anxiety, stomach problems, lines that I used to kind of think were funny, kind of take on this other chilling uh, quality, which is, give me a Leonard Cohen afterworld so I can sigh eternally. I'm on warm milk and laxatives, cherry flavored antacids. I mean, you could, when you hear In Utero and you hear that, it's like, it's some silly, crazy Kurt stuff. But then you know a little bit more about his story, and it's eerie. This is the one that Kurt plays by himself. Do It By Yourself. Josh and I were talking about how, like, in this, like, if you've listened to this as often as we have over the years, not only do you know the songs beat by beat, but you also know the shouted things and like what Kurt's going to say. And Josh and I remember just when we were younger, we used to do that. Like, somebody would be like, do it by yourself.
Do it by yourself.
Am I going to do this one by myself? I mean, these are things we would say at like band practice, like before songs, because we've just heard it over and over again.
Yeah, and then you hear Dave come back in, and after it's over, and this is on the record. This is on the video versions you go find on YouTube now. I don't know if it's on the album version, probably not, because you hear Dave come back, and he comes back on the set, and he's like, "Oh, that sounded good.
That sounded good."
Kurt kind of takes the beat. And he just says, "Shut up."
Shut up.
And I know he's joking, but there does seem to be like a different energy coming from Kurt when he's talking to Dave versus when he's talking to Chris. I don't know.
I think it's on there because the crowd laughs
right
after that. Yeah, gosh, this has to be one where the executives, the producers of the show are just like, "You're going to play this song?" Like, what? Like, when you're listening to this, I imagined myself. I mean, when you listen to this, just in the last couple weeks, as I'm revisiting this album with several years off, I'm listening to Penny Royalty, and I'm imagining me being in the audience, and it's almost like, I would almost think it's like unsettling. Like, the crowd's kind of like, what kind of journey are we going on here? And I know people recognized it from the album. But this is very different. Him just playing those chords and singing by himself with no other, you know, bass distortion or drumming. It's just this raw thing, and it's kind of bizarre, um and you almost think, wow, you like you said earlier, said you almost have to really want to get this out there to go here and to have the confidence that it's like I'm gonna pull this off, and I don't really care if anybody likes it. This is my time. I get to play what I want. This is what I want to play. And I mean, when it's over, I kind of appreciate it, but it's almost like an unsettling journey, like you said. It's a it's a heck of a song that I really like, but the album version I think is a little easier to listen to.
Yeah, my take on this is I think this particular song and performance is one that gave Kurt a great deal of anxiety, and I think he was sincere up until that last moment and asking if he was going to do it by himself, because that I think it made him hugely uncomfortable. But I think he picked this song, I think, because he really wanted us to hear it. He really wanted us to to feel where he was coming from and some of the thoughts and feelings that he had inside. So I think that's why he kind of selected into this one. But I felt like he was really kind of pouring it all out, right? I think he was, just pulling it right from the gut, and, hitting some of the notes, and his kind of gravelly voice in some aspects of the song were just, amazing. And he pulled it off, is kind of how I look at it is, he was probably not looking forward to that and being all by himself on that stage, performing solo. But hats off. I think to your point, Josh, it was one of the more obscure tracks off of In Utero that I just fell in love with after hearing this performance.
There's such weight to this song. You're right. It's very vulnerable and it's very raw. Before we move on, I'm going to talk just for a second about Kurt's guitar. This Martin 1959 D18E. It's such a cool and iconic guitar. Just wanted to have a second to talk about it because of the wiring, the pickups. It's really more of an electric sounding, one of the more electric sounding acoustic guitars that you could have. Like it almost just sounds like an electric guitar. Kurt's guitar was modified. He put the additional pickups in. There's all sorts of stories about like whether the knobs were functional or not. He obviously had to switch it up to make sure that he could play left-handed. But he left this to Frances Bean, whose husband got it in a divorce, which how he pulled that off, I don't know. And in 2020, and there's all sorts of stuff about like Courtney like going after this dude to get the guitar back and all this stuff. But it sold in 2020 at an auction for $6 million, which makes it the most expensive guitar ever sold at an auction. So,
It's amazing.
crazy that this is probably in some like Silicon Valley tech guys like guitar room at this point. It's probably like a showpiece at parties.
Yeah, I loved the sound. I like, all the, they had everything just right. It was supposed to be unplugged. I read that he had his amplifier kind of hidden behind this fake monitor box. And he had some foot pedals and things down there. But this is really what inspired me to be a Martin guy. Why I'm kind of was drawn to that sound. Honestly, is kind of what I was like. I want to sound like that. And
Yeah.
now I don't own a $6 million guitar. I paid a little bit less for mine, but this
Is that
was
a Martin behind you right there?
yeah, that's the D26. So
And now everybody, Landon's going to perform Penny Royalty.
yeah, just if you just dim the lights a little bit.
And then after that, I'm going to do Dumb. Another one off of In Utero, probably more of an obscure one off of In Utero, tailor made for Unplugged. Just like All Apologies, Dumb features this cello version on the album. Even though In Utero has some really heavy, gnarly stuff on it, Nirvana, they're finding like this is more restrained gear. You hear it a little bit on In Utero that gives songs space to breathe a little bit. Finds a different kind of heaviness. It's heavy in a different way. It's heavy not with distortion, but with just emotion. Such a quintessential Nirvana lyric. I think I'm dumb, maybe just happy. Frances Bean says that this song makes her cry when she hears it. She feels like she hears him feeling inadequate to be titled the voice of a generation. Thought that was an interesting quote from her. But Josh, where does Dumb fall for you? Is Dumb, was Dumb one that was kind of on your radar before this one?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, when I got those Nirvana albums when I was young, I would listen to them all the way through. If they had the lyrics in the album sheets, I would follow along and read the lyrics. I remember liking Dumb immediately. I was thinking about something you were talking about there. I can almost hear the album version and hear Nevermind and Songs Off in Utero. I feel like Nirvana used, when they did those quiet songs, they recorded the vocals. It almost sounded like it was way in the distance. It almost gave it this like really fragile, vulnerable quality. So I love Nirvana, both of those lanes. I love the crazy, like punk lane, like let's play fast and scream. I also love the stripped down, like really fragile, self-deprecating lyrics. And but yeah, I like Dumb upon first listen, and this is one that kind of sounds a lot like the album version because that's how they recorded it on the album. But I love the cello. You know, all the instruments and musicians that are on stage with this, I just think is phenomenal. And it's I don't know. I feel like a lot of bands went on unplugged and just played their normal things, and I like how Nirvana said, "Hey, let's incorporate some more interesting sounds."
Yeah, Laurie Goldston does a great job here on the cello and kind of bringing us into that extra dimension that they introduced, in this recording. And maybe it's, hats off to Pat Smear, who joined them, I think, prior to this album, on tour, kind of helping out, taking some weight off that kind of helped them broaden out a little bit. But yeah, Dumb was one of my favorites on In Utero. I love how it was done here. It's almost when I was thinking about the song, I feel like he was kind of making an excuse to be happy and trying to find some happiness. And I think it's, the song's kind of about finding some space and checking out a little bit. Just make yourself dumb and that when you're in that zone, those two things are kind of entangled a little bit. And so it was almost an explanation of how he could find a little bit of happiness in life. So but no, great song, great production, and everybody on stage did a tremendous job with this piece.
This There's a lyric in there, and there's something about we'll go hang out on clouds,
Yeah,
and then something. So if I like you know, you think about, gosh, when we were listening to this as teenagers, here coming up on a plane, there's a lyric where it's like, I got so high, scratched till I bled. I just remember listening to those lyrics as a teenager and being like, what in the world are we talking about here? I mean, these were, and you could, even when you're 14, we'd watched enough movies where it's like, you get those metaphors, go hang out on some clouds and then come, when then we come down, you understand kind of what they're talking about there. But yeah, that's interesting that this song is so calm and serene, and he's talking about checking out a little bit and go hanging out on the clouds.
Gosh, speaking of lyrical content and like some darkness, Polly off of Nevermind. This is such a dark song. No way around that. Like, there's no way to talk about this. It's just coming right at it. These themes of sexual assault are just fairly prominent in their music and Kurt's writing, just in general, beyond this song. But when I first heard this as a kid, all I really paid attention to was that opening couplet. Polly wants a cracker. I just thought it was this like sick kind of twisted joke. And then you learn more about Kurt, his attitude towards women. And, he was very anti the chauvinistic sort of rock thing. It was one of the reasons he in GNR, Guns N' Roses had these big feuds and stuff. He had a very different, more modern attitude towards women. And then you learn about that, and then you kind of read into it, and it's like, oh, this song is supposed to be very menacing and told from the perspective of the perpetrator, and it's supposed to be harrowing, dark story, and it's about a true life incident in Tacoma in 1987. And Kurt was just not afraid to go to these places lyrically, the darkest subject matter possible from the perspective of the bad guy, and this is just begging to be misunderstood, but really just a devastating song.
Yeah, I don't think I know I didn't pick up on uh the entire weight of the song. I'm like you. I remember hearing the first couplet and thinking it was funny. It was like, "Oh, that's funny. It's not what I was expected." And
It
but
was a
not
parrot.
really, yeah, not really going beyond that. So that's interesting. But I spent a lot of time with Nevermind, and I always loved this song and thought it was super cool. And I think they did a great job on the unplugged version also.
Yeah, same here, Josh. Love this on Nevermind. It was one of those that I taught myself how to play it. Love the melodies, the harmonies here jumping out again. But Seth, you're right, man. This is a dark song, and his own interpretation of those events in 1987. So he's adding a lot of taking a lot of creative freedoms here in his interpretation, and taking this view from the perpetrator's perspective. And at first, when first time I listened to it, I was like, "Is this a bird? Like, what are we talking about here?" And the more you listen to it, the more you understand. It's like, man, this is really dark. But I think that overall kind of keeps like a positive vibe in the song, and I think it's just another just a perfect match for this set. And I couldn't imagine them, not including this song that night.
Josh, what do you think about moving into On a Plane off of Nevermind? What was this one that is this one of your go tos from this album?
Yes. This is like the perfect Nirvana lane for me. It's like you mentioned Lithium earlier, those fast songs but are super melodic. The very easy to follow melody and pleasing to the ear melodies. That's my favorite. So I remember listening to Nevermind. When you're a kid and you have to talk your parents into buying a cassette tape for you that costs $10.99 at Walmart, you're just hoping when you get it home that it's like, gosh, I hope the three songs I've heard on the radio aren't the only good three songs on here, and you can't wait to hear the whole thing. And you hear a song like On a Plane, and you're like, yes, this is maybe my favorite song on here. So I've always loved this one. And then I think to pull it off and unplugged is a feat in itself. I think they did a great job, and it's it would seem to be rather challenging in that setting, but I think the unplugged version's awesome.
Landon, do you prefer the Nevermind version or the unplugged version of On a Plane?
No, I think unplugged, and I think it's there's this. They really just recast a lot of these songs, right? I mean, we're used to the heavy, soft, heavy type blueprint that they use in so many of their songs, and playing these like heavy chords, and this was one that they just somehow stripped down, and it made sense. Again, it's the band is really tight on this one. I love this rendition of On a Plane, and it is my preferred version.
I feel like this is just a really good distillation of Kurt's songwriting, of what he does. It's like somewhat of a strange song, but it's also one of the more musical, especially with the harmonies that Dave's singing was kind of close harmonies, really good. That bridge, like it's not something you always hear in Nirvana songs, but Kurt has like a definite style, and he deviates from it, but he plays a lot of major chords. with just like an occasional minor chord thrown in, but he plays them outside of your standard major scale. And if you're not like musical, just hang with me for a second. But I feel like this is important to understanding how he writes. So minor chords are known for being the sad chords. They really evoke that feeling from you. But Kurt elicits the same feelings emotionally that you would get from minor chords because of the tension and the dissonance of his chord choices. And it's just a hallmark of his writing. It's like all these major chords exist in this sort of imbalance, like this harmonic imbalance. It's like, what key am I in? Where am I going to next? There's this kind of unsteadiness. But then when he sings, his melodies sometimes imply minor chord tones, even when he's playing the major chords. There are a lot of examples of this. Smells Like Teen Spirit's a good example of this. In Bloom, and this song On a Plane, which is why I like it so much. But it's in Lithium, you mentioned that one too in context of this one. I think there's a little bit of that going on too. Now Kurt knows different types of chord voicings and all this stuff, but it's just the way he writes. It's unexpected where he's going to go to next. You're never quite sure of your footing, and he often achieves that sort of unsettling nature that you would get from minor chords just by using these major chord tones in really interesting ways.
David Bowie did that really well too. So
Mm.
it's not a surprise that Kurt was probably listening to a lot of David Bowie records.
Something in the Way, off of Nevermind. This fucking song is about as heavy as a song can get. It starts off like feeling a little eerie, but once you get to the chorus, this packs a punch, and it's like this song is how you communicate sadness via music without just blatantly saying like I'm sad. They use this in the more recent Robert Pattinson Batman, which is a wild choice for a Batman movie, but strangely effective. Landon, did you remember that one?
Oh, dude!
Did you like that
When I
choice?
first heard that, I was like, "Wow, this works!" Like, I would have never picked this song to be in a Batman movie, but that particular scene, it just fit, man. I think he's probably like riding at nighttime and kind of had the whole vibe going, so it was on the nose.
Josh, what do you think about this one? When this was on Nevermind, was this one that you would was this a go to, or was this kind of a grower?
Well, I feel like it was the last track on the album, maybe. So it was like, you know, it was like a perfect finale. And it's slow and it's like, hey, you've already gone this far. You might as well hang in there. The album recording is you would say, oh, if we need something for an acoustic set, this would make sense. So I think it was a perfect choice for Unplugged because like you were saying, Landon, he he was setting a mood and seemed wanted to convey a message, and this is a pretty good song to fit right into that mood and convey that message.
Yeah, the story goes that when he was homeless there for a little while, that's what inspired this song and when he wrote it for the first time. So, to your point, he's got all these emotions that he's trying to convey through his lyrics and through this performance. And to your point, Seth, I mean, this is one of those where he's trying to get it out, right? Like I think this really captures the essence of his mood. To your point earlier, this was a very stressful, several days when they're preparing for this. You mentioned above, like a lot of folks had noted that he's got the shakes, most likely going through some sort of withdrawal symptoms. And I think this really kind of captures his, where he was kind of in that moment. And certainly in reflection of the day that he wrote it.
The cello on this song too. It's just like you mentioned, Laurie Goldston. I mean, this thing really shines here. It's that extra layer, and what a great choice of an instrument to have up there to supplement them. The what about Plateau, Landon? The Brothers Meet. The Brothers Meet come out. The Meat Puppets. Gets into a pretty cool start to the album.
Yeah. Okay. So this is, as I mentioned before, I'd never heard the Meat Puppets. I never heard these songs. But this is definitely up there. One of my favorites. Kurt does an amazing job. I think this was another one that he was really nervous about because there's really high notes in this song, as there is on Meat Puppets too. He's really having to get up there, but I think he nailed it. I love the storytelling. It's kind of a silly song, and super catchy. And this is one of those that I've attempted to play and perform and over the years. It's kind of a crowd pleaser. A lot of people that may not be as big a Nirvana nerds as we are will get on board and really like this song too.
Yeah, this is my favorite stretch of the album when they bring on Kirkwood and do the Meat Puppets covers. I mean, I think even as a teenager, once I spent probably a year or two with this album, Plateau and Oh Me became my two favorite songs. And still, when I go back to it today, I took some time off. I might throw Man Who Sold the World or something in a playlist, but I hadn't pulled this album out and listened to it start to finish. And still, as soon as Plateau comes on, it's like, okay, are you serious? Here we go. Now I mean, this is wild.
I love that. Again, like you've got this platform, and you're just like, hey, you guys want to come up and play three of your songs? And it's a cool look. It's like a different, Pat Smear leaves, Lori Goldston leaves, obviously Kirk and Chris, they come up, and the Kirkwood brothers, Kurt and Chris, which is interesting. Kurt and Chris. Uh, also like the story of how they like the bassist Chris was like, he sings harmonies on these songs, and he had a microphone in front of him, and they never rehearsed it. But he's like, "I've got a microphone in front of me. I'm going to sing it," and he sings all the harmonies on these songs that he normally would. Landon, you're right too that it's like. I think that someone had suggested or talked about maybe do we change keys or something to make this more suitable for Kurt's voice, but he liked that having to strain and go for it. But just such a wild choice to bring these people out and introduce them to the world. I'm sure they go on to have not that they haven't had a career already. Obviously, that's why Kurt knew about them, but they go on to have their own hits. We talked about Backwater, Josh. I think it was in the 1994 modern rock tracks on the Billboard. They charted there, so they have their own success, no doubt. Like this kind of exposure helped them. And then you get Kurt without a guitar, which is, you talk about being vulnerable, and he kind of fidgets around and spins in an office chair that he stole because he didn't like the stool. It's just a different look to see Kurt up there without a guitar. I kind of forgot that until preparing for this, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. During the stretch, he just doesn't even play the guitar at all.
I think I read something where when Kurt presented the idea that was going to play with the Kirkwoods and play three Meat Puppet songs, and the pushback from the executives were like, what are you talking? Why would you do that? And he just said, look, I like these songs and they're fitting for this set. They're going to be really good. And I think he even said something like, look, I'm going to bring these guys in. They already know how to play the songs. We don't have to take a long time to rehearse. We already know the songs. Let's just play these songs. So I thought that was funny. You think about I don't think I'd given much time to like, oh, they were touring and they had to in the middle of their tour, stop here and rehearse a whole new set for this thing that's going to be massive. It's going to be on TV, and we're going to make it an album, and we need to get it right. So, I just think. As a kid, you're just thinking, "Gosh, these guys are so talented! They just stopped by that night and whipped out some guitars and played 14 songs they already knew." But yeah, to just reiterate, I mean, I think the vocals on this song, the here's another kind of an epic story that we get, and then we get to hear a song that is not what Nirvana is used to. This is something totally different that we're that we're accustomed to with Nirvana. So I think this song is super cool.
Talk to me about "Oh Me," Josh. You mentioned this one a little bit earlier, but where do we go from here? I mean, is this like peak unplugged for you?
Yeah, because I mean that rich acoustic guitar. I mean, it sounds like Jar of Flies, Alice in Chains, just acoustic lushness, and that riff is just it's very what I discovered later. It's very typical Meat Puppets. Their songwriting, but I had no frame of reference of Meat Puppets in the '90s. And this is something I discovered later as you go back and discover, um, what influences and what songs people were covering. It was later I looked into the Meat Puppets, but man, this this riff and then the the beautiful melody and the harmonies in there. This one grabbed me immediately, and I still like it today. When I put it in, it's like this is the one I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, same here, man. This is my favorite Nirvana performance of all time, and my
Mm.
favorite track on the album. You just listed a bunch of reasons, but the melody in this song, the lyrics really hit the way that Kurt's delivering them. I can formulate infinity and store it deep inside me is kind of a very modest thing to say, and I think here we are. These guys are kind of the peak rock stars in the world at this point, and he does not want that, right? So I feel like he's really telling us like, listen, I don't want this. Like I realize, what I could do and what I'm capable of, but it's you got the wrong guy, right? And but absolutely love this song. This wasn't actually included in the MTV performance. They actually cut this and something in the way. So for me, I mentioned I had my tape recorder out, so and that's how I was really listening to this music at the time. So it was this was the most pleasant surprise when when I finally got the record. I will mention that I was trying to fill that gap, right? I was like, the Meat Puppets, who are these guys? Thing one and thing two. All right, I need to go. I need to go figure out where these songs are coming from, and I found Meat Puppets 2 CD at a record store when I was visiting my uncle in Florida, and I got it, and I'm expecting what I'm hearing, at Unplugged. It is not that. I'll just break the news for anybody that's curious. Go listen to it, but it's very different. So the translation to this live setting with the instruments and with the brothers there is just perfection. I think they took a really good, well written song and perfected it here.
You guys both mentioned the guitar riff. It's just like so classic. And Kirkwood's guitar work on this song is so good on this whole stretch here. It's a really quirky song, really interesting lyrically and musically. It goes all over the place. It really um, goes to interesting places when you don't expect it. And Kurt obviously kills it. It's weird to me because everything he sings sounds like it came from him, even though this clearly does things that Kurt doesn't do in his songs. Like a lot of these chord changes and some of the more like ethereal sort of things it goes into, it's not something you really hear Kurt do. But these three songs all sound Nirvana like. Even when you listen to the Meat Puppet versions, they just sound like the Meat Puppets. But when Kurt does it, it sounds like Nirvana. And I think there's a little bit one of my favorite things too is like there's this little bit of a false start that you hear in the video. I think they kind of tampered it down on the album version, but on one of the choruses, he kind of jumps the gun a little bit. And it's just one of those little things that I love, those little imperfections. It just reminds you the tight wire that they're on here and how authentic this whole performance is.
I just reiterate your earlier comment. Like this is the home stretch, right? This is kind of they really kind of lined it up here, beginning with the Meat Puppet covers, and definitely kind of the sweet spot of the album for me. Leading right up to Lake of Fire, which is just another amazing song.
I think it shows you that Kurt is such a fan of these songs that he
Oh,
chose.
100%.
That's
100%.
why, that's one of the reasons why it comes off as excuse me, it almost comes off as like, are you sure that's a cover? Because it sounds like, it came from him, because he's probably spent some time, he likes these songs and he's been singing them. At least that's how I imagine it. Maybe it's not true for all of them, but I think that's why he put such a good stamp on all of these covers.
Like you mentioned, Lake of Fireland, and again the last Meat Puppet song here. When I was a kid, I think this was my first like favorite on the album. Just so wicked, and more creative, great guitar work by Kurt Kirkwood. This is a tad more bluesy than Nirvana typically gets. Obviously we're coming up to a Lead Belly song soon, but all of these cover songs on the album are almost showcasing Kurt as a curator again of obscure and beautiful music. Just I love the support that he gives other artists, but Lake of Fire it's unlike the other ones. I feel like it's a little more straightforward lyrically. It's crazy and but just like you could just dive into this one immediately. I didn't have to think too much. I could just immediately take up Lake of Fire. I mean, like that. This song is cool. This is a cool song.
Where do bad folks go when they die? I think this to me is kind of the point in the album where you're starting to see a little chink in the armor, right? His voice is starting to crack, and see him again till the 4th of July. It's kind of, it's not right, but it's right. Like it's perfect, but it's not what he intends to convey. Just another amazing song. I think there's a great solo here. In the middle of the song that just kind of really ties it all together. And way to kind of close out on the Meat Puppets portion of this recording and their efforts, and to your point earlier, Josh, like their influence obviously on Kurt, and like lyrically and inspiring the kind of him to perform this as Nirvana would perform it, I think is just the perfect choice for this album.
It's interesting what you said, Landon, about Kurt getting here and his message is like, look, this giant fame is not what I want. I'm just a regular guy like these other guys. Look, here's who I'm a fan of. Let me bring on these guys who I'm a giant fan of. But yeah, Lake of Fire, I remember that one like taking off uh, with fans that weren't that big of Nirvana fans. This album was so huge. This is one of those albums like the Weezer Blue album where it like people who were not fans of rock music listened to this album, may have even owned it. It was like you said, it was like the Reese's on the counter at Movie Land. It was like everybody's like standing in line to pay, and it's like, oh, they've got the Unplugged. It's like they're spontaneously buying MTV Unplugged on CD when they're checking out in the mid 90s. Everybody was listening to this, and you would just hear kids, like teenagers, like walking around, like singing this really bizarre, awkward chorus, like, where the bad folks? It's almost like everybody's been to Sunday school. And we're rocking around talking about what eternal damnation and what's gonna happen, and I just thought that was bizarre that this is the song that ever that like people are really gravitating towards.
Yeah, one it's worth mentioning. I think first, he's kind of been taking us to these dark places throughout the album, and in this case, it really to me it kind of evokes the afterlife and what things that could happen to somebody or to bad folks especially. But I want to go back to another thing you mentioned about just the popularity of this album. They're really kicking the door down here, and it really became extremely popular. In fact, I believe it was hit #1 on the Billboard Top 200. Just a testament to read above. Smells Like Teen Spirit came out. We're all like, what in the world is going on here? To having just a smash hit album with every song is just a banger on it. So anyway, that's another reason why I love this album is that it reached so many people.
All Apologies, on the other hand, is I feel like had to grow on me for a little while, but this is today. This is my favorite Nirvana song. Originally from In Utero, this had not been released as a single when they recorded this. But for me, this is Kurt at his best, and I love both versions. It's perfectly placed here as the second to last song. You know, the Meat Puppet stretches over. We're back to the first lineup, but the riff, the melody, I just when I wonder what could have been with Kurt Cobain's future, this is the song that hurts the most because it's so unlike anything else that any other artist could write. Like this comes from one guy, and it's beautiful and it's kind of uplifting but also sad. It's just it's what he does, and this is everything to me when it comes to Nirvana. Like this is the this is when I'm looking up Nirvana in the dictionary. This is what I'm going to want to see as the definition.
This is the perfect um, example of irony with this song. Like you said, it's like here's these beautiful strings, and it's like presented. It's like, oh, this sounds sweet, and then it's like, and then the haunting lyrics and menacing twist it takes, and then that married, buried. It's like when I'm a kid, you know, when I'm a teenager, I'm just like, oh, married and buried, they rhyme, and it's like, oh, that's it's like to think about now that I'm married, and, to think that he records this and it's putting this out just like he knows how where this is gonna go. It's like that is like pretty incredible and
Yeah.
wild. But yeah. And then once once he decides to end his own life and he's gone, well, then it's like, well, gosh, now we have a banner song here that you know this is just this now this makes so much sense.
Yeah, I feel like again, I mentioned this a few times before, but we're getting dark here where it's a lot of foreboding, and I think this is sincerely an apology. I mean, he dedicated this song to Courtney and Francis, uh, you know, and that was kind of widely known at the time. But to your point, Josh, like in hindsight, you go back and you listen and you watch him, and I feel like that is he's really he kind of has almost made up his mind at this point, right? I realize it's a few months away, but it really is him apologizing, to his family and his fans and friends.
Heartbreaking stuff. And also just like there's such beauty to this song too. And there's a bit of a lightness amongst all the dark. But to close things out, we get into Lead Belly. Traditional song, Where Did You Sleep Last Night? In the Pines was kind of the song that it stems from. They call Lead Belly their favorite performer. Lead Belly also, just like listen to that guy. It sounds like this man is just taken from deep in the Delta and is just, singing his heart out. This song has now taken on a near mythical status. But when you watch this or just listen to it, it's true that this is like a transcendent moment on the album. Lori Goldson's cello, this heavy, impenetrable mood. But we have to talk about this one particular moment, right? And you guys might know what I'm referring to, but I remember not long after this was released, maybe a couple years at most, I heard some older kids talking about this moment when Kurt almost has like this out of body experience or something while performing this song. And of course, with what happened to Kurt, people can overanalyze it maybe, but that story always stuck with me. And then I remember separately hearing someone else was a slightly different twist on it, but talking about the same moment. And it's at the end of the song. It's after he says shivers the whole before he says night through. His eyes just pop open like immediately before he sings that last line. I was watching this and I had forgotten about all those stories. And I'm just sitting there enjoying the music. I'm pretty absorbed in it and in the whole performance. And that moment hits where his eyes pop open and it like jolted me. Like it was powerful, and I don't know what's happening there, but it feels very visceral. And if it's just the theatrics, then like that's almost just as impressive that someone could pull that off. But it feels very real. And I don't know what's going on in Kurt's mind there. Of course, people have projected a lot of things that could be going on in his mind there. But buddy, that will shake you out of your seat watching that.
Yeah, earlier I said I used to tell a story where would be talking to somebody who's not familiar with Unplugged or Nirvana's whole story, and I was like, "Oh yeah!" And 6 weeks after this amazing performance, he took his own life, and it wasn't 6 weeks. It's more like I don't know,
A few months.
5 months, four
Yeah.
months. But I used to tell that story. I was like, because I think I'd had the story told to me, or I think, I was such a Nirvana fan that I just soaked up anything that was out there. And I think I had seen that video slow down and people saying, "Oh, look at this moment. Is
This is
this,"
the moment.
when he was like communicating to us like, no, this is really happening, this is it, this was the moment he decided he was going to do that or whatever.
Right.
People blow it out of proportion, but I think I was very aware of that. I think I was spreading that lore, to people who had never heard that story, and I was mesmerized by this performance. Here you have the way he sang and screamed on this song is the way I'm used to hearing Nirvana or seeing live performances of their concerts. That's what I was used to. So this stripped down unplugged version is super cool. And then when you get to there, it's like, oh yeah, here we go. He's cranking it up here. So and to do that in that small room, in that stripped down setting, for him to let the vocals out and to just scream like that, I'm like, this is amazing. And I remember when I finally had the album and was just listening to it over and over again. I mean, this performance, this whole song, just the whole song, how he performs, his voice, the screaming and the way he sings, I'm mesmerized, and I think this was the genius of Kurt Cobain.
Absolutely. Landon, was this one that you have I seen you play this one on guitar before? That
Yeah,
feels
yeah. This is another one, and actually, just taking it back a little bit. This song means a lot to me because my grandfather used to play "In the Pines" to me.
mm,
Kind of the more bluesy version, and I was already familiar with the song, and so it was you couldn't have closed out the album any better. I mentioned earlier, he was starting to show a few chinks in his armor here that you could tell the guitar's a little out of tune, but it's fine, right? It fits. And I think when I think about this song and his choice of this song, I mean, it's almost like he's conveying like a little, like to me, it's dark, right? But it's also a little scary, right? The
mm.
pines, the sun never shines, shivers, like it's almost like, you know, maybe he's kind of tipping his hat. He's a little afraid here, but and it also kind of comes through in his voice. I feel like the way he says towards the end of the song, "I'll shiver," like he kind of draws that out, and his voice is
Yeah.
all shaky. It's like his voice is shivering, right? And he has that pause, and then they just blow it out, and close out the song and the album. But it's my second favorite song in the album, but right behind "OB." Super, just a powerful song, powerful lyrics, and couldn't have been delivered any better. And I think it's a testament to Nirvana and their performance, and just being in this moment to play this all the songs we've discussed front to back, no stops, and to end here and say no encore. And I think as the story goes, Kurt said, "Look, I can't top that." Like he knew that he had what he had done and how he had closed this album and this whole experience so solidly.
So this is recorded on November 18th. It airs about a month later, December 16th, 1993. About 5 months after that, April 5th, Cobain commits suicide. 7 months after that, the Unplugged album hits the shelves, debuts at number one, wins a Grammy. At this point, it's 8 times platinum. Again, I remember buying this, I wore it out, but there was this tragic quality when buying it because you knew the guy wasn't no longer with us. Today, I feel like there are just as many, if not more, Nirvana fans because of younger generations. If there's one band shirt that you see out there, and even if 40% of those people actually listen to Nirvana, there's so many people out there who found this the way that we found name your favorite classic rock band, Zeppelin or Jim
Beatles.
Morrison and the Doors, or like who, especially Hendrix, the guys who died young, especially. And for younger audiences, what was this time like when Kurt killed himself? How clearly do you remember this happening and the impact that it had, Josh?
Shock. Nirvana was so marketable that they were just everywhere. I think they were on MTV all the time. They're on the radio all the time. He's in the news all the time because here's this person that's, different, that it's like, let's follow him, send a camera and just follow him because there's going to be a story wherever he is. So I remember it being such a shock and painful because it's like, here's something I've just gotten into and I've become a huge fan and I love this guy. And now it's like, okay, and now that's the end. It's like I just got into this and really like it and I'm identifying with it and now it's gone. And it was extremely sad and depressing. And I remember being angry, like, why in the world? Like you're on top of the world and this is so good. Why end why end it now?
Landon, you were like just a couple years older than us, and so I imagine that you probably had. When we talked earlier, I think you said maybe you were a freshman when this first aired, at least, or maybe when the album came out. But you were probably also around a lot of other people who were like, it was a cultural thing, like people you and your friends would listen to it. What do you remember about the end there when we lost Kurt?
Yeah, I remember the exact moment I found out. Actually, I was at my dad's house in the basement, and we were kind of standing around the counter, probably getting ready for dinner or something. And my sister, Letitia, comes downstairs, and just like it's like a Friday or so. I can't remember what day of the week it was, but I think. We were. I remember being in a great mood, and she just in passing said, "Oh, I think she was like, how you doing? Like, you doing okay? I know the guy from Nirvana died." And I was like, "What?" And she just, kind of just nonchalantly kind of mentioned it in passing. And I'm like, whoa, wait, which guy? What are you talking about? And I had no idea. And it struck me like a bag of hammers. Because, to your point, Josh, I mean, they're at peak popularity. I'm all in, right? I go from, you know, not understanding them and not caring to just all in, right? In Utero, I mentioned, was my first album. I listened to it over and over again. I was just consuming as much Nirvana as I possibly could. And it strikes me that that's probably the first major, like, call it idol, I don't know, like, band that I just absolutely loved that was just taken away. And, or actor, or, fill in the blank, just something that you just absolutely love. I started having these feelings like, like when something like that's gone, it's gone. Like it's over, game over. I remember, I remember the watching the news and the helicopter footage of his house, and it was just all over MTV and mainstream news as well. But yeah, it was just a coming to realization that things like this have a beginning and an end, and the end in this case was way too soon, and it's just really sad for him and his family. But it's also sad that potential, that opportunity was gone. Like, imagine if they had stuck around and he didn't have these issues and challenges with depression and drug abuse. Like, how many years could they have continue to do that. I mean, you look at what Pearl Jam's done; they continue to just put out, great albums, and it just makes you wonder, right? What could have happened? What would have happened if he didn't take his life?
I think Nirvana is such an interesting band because I think Bleach came out in 1989. I don't know if you looked up when Nirvana started, what year it first started, but Bleach came out in 89, and then he takes his life in April of 94. I mean, they had this they had this small window and they packed it in with these albums, these great albums, and they were just selling albums like astronomical sales and touring their tours. I don't know the exact facts, but I mean, it seems like they're popular in every country they tour. They're just selling massive amounts of tickets. So, it is crazy to think what would have happened. I was talking with my wife about it earlier and explaining that little history with her, and I remember when I heard that Dave Grohl had a band called Foo Fighters and that they had an album coming out, and it was like hope again. It was like, oh my gosh, yes, maybe this will fill this void and something good. And just think about what the Foo Fighters have accomplished. I feel like Dave Grohl was so talented and probably ambitious that even if Kurt, you know, never took his life and Nirvana had like this 30-year career, that Dave Grohl probably at some point leaves and says, hey, this is fun, but I'm going to do my own thing. So crazy to think about the what ifs if Kurt Cobain was still alive today.
I remember when In Utero came out, there were a lot of like retrospectives or like the anniversary of In Utero, a lot of retrospectives. And, one of the things that we talk about was like, was Dave on the outs with Kurt anyway? Was Kurt kind of like in that headspace? But you do get the sense that like, you just look at what he did, his choices he made for Unplugged. Whatever choices he made, I don't think we would have been able to predict them. I think they would have been like, "What are you doing? You're breaking up Nirvana. Like you're disassembling Nirvana, and you're doing this up. Like who knows what this guy would have done." But the interesting thing too about Kurt is I feel like there's always this dichotomy with him. It's these two different warring parts of his brain. Because there's this story, and I don't know whether he's talking to David Geffen or whoever it is, but he comes into a label pretty early on in their career. It might be before Nevermind. And he's like, I want to be the biggest band in the world. Like there's this ambition to him. And then there's everything that you're talking about, Landon, which is like this sort of like, I don't want this. And maybe he got what he wanted and he didn't want it, but there's all sorts of signs of him resenting this stuff, of him feeling like his life's kind of been taken away from him and he doesn't even belong to himself anymore. And the weight of that, you watch them in interviews from around this time and even a little bit earlier. And it's Dave and Chris that do most of the talking. Kurt just kind of is it's like I don't know, I don't even know what you want me to say. I'm tired of this dog and pony show. After Nevermind just is a phenomenal success, he basically just cancels a tour in the middle of it and goes home and just hangs out and does heroin and and just is just like, I just want to sit around and play my guitar. And he was adverse to the things that he sought out, and there's something toxic about that. And I feel like there's always this reconciliation that can never quite happen. But if you look at Kurt's history, it's like he had a rough childhood. It's like he tried to live with his mom, but he was kind of a problem child, and she sent him to his dad, and like that was going okay. But then his dad got married, and he did not get along with his stepmother, and then so he goes to live with grandparents for a couple weeks, and they're like, we don't know what to do with him. Send him back to. It's like he's bouncing around and he's feeling all of these different types of rejection. And I mean, it's endless armchair psychiatry that you could do with this guy. And I won't go any deeper into it than that. But it's like there's something in him that feels. And you read about his addiction issues, and his heroin use, and he's in rehab a few days before they stage this intervention. And then he goes to rehab, and like a day or two later, he escapes from rehab, and this whole time he's kind of asking his friend to like get a shotgun for him and get shells. It's like there's something. I hate to use the word damned, but there's something about Kurt that feels like there is this inevitability about where he's headed. There's something fated. He's fated to end up in this place, and it's tragic and it's awful and it's quite dark, but it's also, there's also some really, he's also funny and he's also charming. And I mean, obviously the guy's like, I mean, he's basically like a model that had to help the appeal of the whole thing, but you see him in Unplugged, and he can be really charming, and that quiet, withdrawn thing. Whenever he says anything, anybody's listening, and he gets laughs. It's fun. You do get the sense that there was probably a lot of fun that happened in here too, despite it being a really dark story. Guys, this has been a blast. Landon, thank you for choosing this album. This is the first Nirvana album we've talked about. It's the first live album we've talked about. And I've had so much fun watching this, listening to it, just going in deep in the Nirvana world. And it's been a blast doing it with you too. If you are out there and you've watched all of this thing, well, then you have to have enjoyed it, unless you just hate watch the whole thing. So like Josh said earlier at the top here, give us a thumbs up on the video, like us if you're in the podcast world, follow us, check out more of the album deep dives that we've done. We have some more that are coming up soon too. But yeah, and then subscribe to the channel too. That probably helps more than anything. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll be back next time with another discussion of the music that you love.
Am I going to have to do this by myself?
Do it for yourself.